Australian Commercial Glassblowers Proprietary Limited operates as a worker cooperative. It was established late last year by 10 glassblowers retrenched through the closure of the Leonora Glassworks in 1982. Today, the company's General Manager, Ray Smith, was presented with more than $5,000 from the Australia Council's Crafts Board and $12,000 from its Design Arts Board. In making the presentation, Chairman of the Council, Professor Donald Horne, commended the workers at the company's Broadmeadow factory for the success they'd made of the venture in the short time it's been operating.
I think the commercial glassblowers have shown some great attributes. They've shown individual enterprise, they were knocked down and out and they picked themselves up. They've been cooperative and collective, they've worked together. They've got assistance from the state government and Westpac, and the reason they've approached the Australia Council is that both in the craft side and the design arts side, they want a little bit more expertise. And the whole thing, I think, is an example of how Newcastle is showing the rest of Australia about one small way in which we can react to the economic crisis. I hope that the grants will enable them to extend their range of design and to extend their quality of product.
Later in the day, Professor Horne took time out to examine an art exhibition which he will officially open this evening at the Community Arts and Adult Education Centre. Professor Horne will also be guest speaker at a conference this weekend at the centre.
And the Supersonics come into the National Basketball League first round with a boom reputation and yet little form on the board so far.
Oh, that's right. They've had a tough time in pre-season, but like I say, pre-season is a different season than the start of the season. And they've made a few changes. They've dropped their big guy, so they picked up Jerry Stewart from Illawarra, who's a good scorer, but they're lacking in a bit of height without the 7-footer, I think.
That'd make you smile a bit, not having to confront a 7-footer, particularly not so much you, but the guys around the boards.
Well, that's right. Our big players, Scott Hurrell and Jimmy Bateman and Stewie Beggs, should have an easier time without a 7-footer in there, because we will have the height advantage now.
They're privately owned, and they've bought supposedly well, but they need to create teamwork, don't they?
That's right. They've brought a lot of reputation players that you get 5 stars in one squad, and it's very hard for everybody to mix with one another, and I think that's where we have an advantage, because we have a bit of a nucleus here for the last 2 or 3 years, and we've brought in a new American this year, and I think he's fitting in well.
How's the shooting going?
Good. I feel really good now. Everybody's fit and ready to go, and we're ready to get the first one up.
We think of basketball, and we think of the Harlem Globetrotters, and they have a Harlem Globetrotter. Is that a plus or a minus or what?
Well, it's a whole different game. This is a serious league here, and the Harlem Globetrotters is for entertainment. They're great individual skills and tricks and all that, but when it comes down to serious basketball, they find problems.
We're talking of Tiny Pinder. How do you rate him in this league?
Well, I've only had a look at him the one time, and he didn't have a very good game against us, but he definitely has natural talent, and he'll have to be reckoned with. I mean, you'll have to play defense on him, or he can easily get 30 points.
How highly do you rate the Falcons' chances?
I rate them really high this year, because everybody's real keen, and there's a new, different outlook with everybody, and I think we're ready to go. You know?
Scott Hurrell, obviously new to the country, let alone the team, seems to have taken the time to find his feet.
Right, well, Scott, it's hard for somebody to come over here and just fit into a team straight away, and Scott is getting better as the season goes on, the preseason goes on, and I think he'll start to realize and get more confidence and come good for us, hopefully.
Last time you played them, they tried the full court press on you. That suits you and Mike Johnson.
That's right.
The long range men.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't understand it, actually. We played them, and they were pressing us the whole game, and we were breaking it with 2 or 3 passes, and they stayed in it. But I doubt if we see it again tomorrow night.
What's going to be the margin?
Oh, I wouldn't say, Lee, but hopefully we'll get up by at least 10 or more.
Current medical statistics available show that 7 people per 100,000 have a form of cancer known as leukemia, a those, 15% are under the age of 10, 20% under the age of 20, and around 50% over 60 years of age. It's still not known what causes leukemia, but it's believed the disease has a genetic cause, in which there's a disturbance in the normal growth patterns of the blood's white cells. With abnormal white cells being produced, the bone marrow, crucial to the body's functioning, can't operate properly. For more than 5 years, bone marrow transplants have been the recognised treatment for the disease. The Hunter prospective transplant patients still have to travel to Sydney for the operation. However, for the past 3 years, some research, diagnosis and treatment of leukemia patients has been done at the Royal Newcastle. 3 Newcastle doctors will be attending this week's Symposium on leukemia. Dr Sandra Deveridge from the Blood Bank, Dr Selden and Dr Arno Eno from the hospital's haematology department.
Well, there's been an encouraging improvement. This has involved the better use of the drugs that are now available, the better understanding of the complications of the drugs and better treatment of patients who are at risk of infection. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the use of bone marrow transplantation. This has been, I think, the single most effective form of therapy at the moment for patients. But unfortunately, it's only available for about 1 in 5 patients.
A study by the Department of Public Works isolated the problem at Jimmy's Beach, which led to 43,000 cubic metres of sand being dredged and dumped last year. The department has found a sand shoal just west of Yakabar Head, which is forcing waves onto Jimmy's Beach and increasing the rate of erosion. At Windawappa, erosion has been so bad the beach has all but disappeared. Sand up to 2 metres from a road directly in front of several homes has also been eroded away. The Department of Public Works has proposed rough configuration dredging as a solution. This involves directly dredging the sand shoal, which is causing the problems, and dumping the sand onto Jimmy's Beach, thereby reducing the shoal and building the beach up again at the same time. The council is hopeful at least 50% of the $2.3 million needed for the scheme will be provided by the government.
The 3-day international symposium at the Colburn Conference Centre was attended by 63 of the world's leading authorities in the research of leukemia. Doctors, professors and scientists gathered for in-depth discussions involving the mechanisms that change normal blood cells into malignant tumours. The Jenny Leukemia Trust Fund, which is sponsoring the seminar, was formed in 1967 and has funded similar conferences every 2 years. However, the 3-day visit this year has allowed participants the opportunity to work and speak together both day and night at the conference centre. The international guest speakers included Professor Robert Gale from the University of Los Angeles in California and Dr. Mel Greaves from the Institute of Cancer Research in London. Both are experts in the research and treatment of the disease. Dr. Greaves said that the cure rate for leukemia is increasing.
20 years ago, all forms of leukemia were universally fatal. But for about 10 years now, there's been an increasing survival rate and probable cure rate in one of the major forms of leukemia that afflicts children. So if you have in your family or you know of a child with leukemia, the chances of long-term remission or cure for childhood leukemia is now about 70%. We now know much more about the biochemistry of leukemic cells. And whereas in the past therapy has been rather non-specific and sometimes a little brutal, there's a new possibility arising of using much more selective therapy that switches off the biochemical machinery that's very specific for the leukemic cell. And it's only in the last 2 years or so that we've understood what that machinery is and what the biochemical mechanisms are.
Restricting ourselves to disability products.
Chairman Robert Elder
So we added
addressed
another
a dinner
word.
gathering which
Income
included
protection
local
insurance
insurance
became
company
income
managers
protection.
and leading local businessmen. IPG, the largest Australian-owned insurance broking company, now operating out of Newcastle, has reorganised. Non-executive members of its new advisory board include representatives of the local legal, engineering and building professions. IPG chairman, Mr. Elder.
As a large broking organisation, we are concerned that the broking industry as such has possibly had more than its share of failures through lack of corporate controls. Having through our organisation Australia-wide established those corporate controls, we believe we can bring them into play here and expand through usual business growth.
Well, what sort of failures are we talking about, and what sort of failures perhaps have Novocastrians suffered?
Well, before broker legislation, which is coming into being right now through the urging of broker organisations, brokers have failed and as a result of those failures have taken monies deemed to be premium monies to put towards their own working operations, and of course their failure as an operational structure has resulted in policyholder loss.
What you're really trying to do is tighten up the whole industry,
yes.
Make sure that the individual and the company doesn't suffer through not illegal practice but loose practice.
That's right, yes. Well, some of it certainly has been illegal, but in the main that's not been the intent of the broking house, it's just been poor business acumen.
The old record was set at Surface Paradise in 1981, which was 12 minutes 41 seconds. Now in the United States, in the last 3 months, they've had an attempt, and the Kern Golf Club in the United States, they've got it down to 10 minutes 30.
A lot of people won't understand how you do this. It's impossible for one person to do it. It requires teamwork and organisation.
Yeah, it requires a huge team of people. The maximum that you're allowed to have is 100. The golf course must be over 6,000 yards long, which our golf course is, and we will have approximately 80 people participating in this, and the way that we're going to do it is that we're going to station them at strategic positions around the golf course so that when the ball comes to rest, hopefully it'll be near one of the next persons that are going to hit it, and then we're going to keep it in a continuous motion around the course. And
it'll be a lot of fun, and they can win something too, Paul.
Yeah, well, it'll be a real lot of fun, and hopefully if we get good weather, we hope to have a big crowd, and of course they can win something, a trip to Coralbin Valley for 4 days, courtesy of Air New South Wales and Coralbin Valley, and I'd just like to thank Greg Waters very, very much for setting this up for us.
And proceeds to the telethon?
Proceeds go to the NBN Telethon, and last Wednesday we had a charity day and we raised $3,500. So we're hoping with the 2 days to raise in the vicinity of $5,000.
The chimney was the only reminder of the old pipeworks left standing as the demolition team went to work. The brick kilns to which it was once connected had already been removed. A large portion of the base of the chimney had also been hewn away, so that only 4 columns concealed behind corrugated iron sheets were supporting its weight. While preparations for the blasting got underway, police were busy keeping the large number of spectators and their vehicles a safe distance from the site. Once the area was clear, 2 charges, one 2.5 kilograms and the other 2 kilograms of gelignite, were set in the front and rear of the chimney's base. After several warning whistles, the 2 blasts brought it neatly to the ground.
Sunday before ANZAC Day traditionally sees the beginning of commemorative activities, and so it was yesterday with the march past Sandgate Cemetery, organised by the Shortland and Waratah Mayfield sub-branches of the Returned Services League. Ex-servicemen and women from both World Wars then gathered with representatives of the Army, Navy and Air Force for a wreath-laying ceremony. At Christchurch Cathedral last night, the dead were remembered in a solemn service. The Book of Remembrance was brought from the Warriors' Chapel and placed upon the altar. This year's service had a special significance for members of the 2nd Battalion of the Army's Royal New South Wales Regiment. It marked the centenary of Newcastle and the Hunters' involvement in the Sudan War. The regimental flag was decorated with battle honours from the campaign, one of the earliest that Australians participated in. After the traditional last post and ode of remembrance, the large congregation was addressed by the Reverend John Brooker, the assistant priest at Merriwa. In a pacifist speech, he recounted his involvement in the Korean War as part of the Navy and told how he discovered that war is neither good nor glorious. The service ended with a procession by the colour parties of the three armed forces.
The World Wildlife Fund Australia was formed in 1978 to raise funds for projects which are concerned with the conservation of native Australian wildlife. Today's display included photographs and information on those species whose survival may depend upon the efforts made by such an organisation. 60 students from Raymond Terrace Primary School attended the exhibition. They were given information about the Australian Wildlife Club, which was formed especially for young people who are concerned with protecting the environment. A special attraction for the students were the baby animals from the Australian National Animal Trust at Blackwood. The children were given the opportunity to see the native animals of our country. Special guests at the shopping centre were the Leyland brothers, who opened the display. Mike Leyland discussed the need to support an organisation such as the World Wildlife Fund.
Well, it needs support to help a lot of our endangered species, which the fund's projects go towards helping along the way. They're building all sorts of things where people can go and see wildlife in the wild and awareness things, and the animals they've got on display here, the photographs and the animals they have on display here, the money goes towards helping our endangered species.
And how can people assist today in the fight for conservation?
Well, they can join the World Wildlife Fund Australia. They can be a member for $25 a year, or they can just send donations to the World Wildlife Fund.
A total of 6 programs were submitted by the Hunter Regional Association of Councils to the federal government. They include a pensioner rebate study sponsored by the Great Lakes Shire Council, a water and sewerage project and corporate management scheme organised by the Scone Shire Council, and a strategy plan for the Pagolban Vineyards sponsored by the Cessnock City Council. The funding provided by the federal government recognises the regional needs of councils in the Hunter. Executive Secretary of the Hunter Regional Association of Councils, Gary Pullen, explained the details of the project, which is expected to have the greatest impact in the Hunter region.
The association believes that the database project will probably have the widest implications and multiplier effect throughout the region, and as such we would think that would be the most important. We believe that from the grants that grant will receive, that will enable us to make more submissions and more better informed submissions to the state and federal government that will result in increased funds flowing to the region.
What are the future plans for the continuation of the projects?
We're led to believe that there will be funding in the next year's Commonwealth budget, and that this particular program has a great chance of being ongoing, and that further funding will come to the region. And at this stage the councils in the region are putting together projects for the association to consider.
More than 200 senior students attended today's lecture at St Joseph's College, given by William D Hershey, President of the National Memory Training Institute in Massachusetts. Many took the opportunity to participate in the handy hints, which were designed to increase the students' abilities to memorise the information learned in the classrooms. Mr Hershey was inspired to visit Australia after reading an article on Uganda girl Margaret Ilyukol. He said he came to Newcastle to pay tribute to great human achievement by attending the finalisation of a New Face for Margaret program held at the Toronto Yacht Club last week. Mr Hershey has already lectured at one seminar organised by the Toronto Rotary Club. A 6-hour workshop this Friday at the Park Royal is aimed at introducing methods to achieve full mental potential in the business world. Despite a society of high technology and microcomputers, Mr Hershey believes there is still a need for memory training exercises.
Temporary memory is like a sponge. It will only hold, say, a quarter of a cup of water. And you can't have 16, if you want a quart of water, you can't store it in 16 sponges. But if you have one sponge and a bucket, you keep bringing out the sponge into the bucket, you can soak up any amount of water and save it. Now the bucket is your permanent memory, the sponge is your temporary memory. You load it up, and then by repetition, maybe 3 times a day, meal times for 3 days, you squeeze it into the bucket.